feel like Dre's supposed to say we're live.
We're live. But we're not. So
we're
there's
live.
that.
We're live. Kick it off.
I've not seen anything live here, but hey, if we're ready to go, we're ready to go.
There's a delay. I mean, it's live, so let's go into it. There's a delay before it hits the site.
I gotcha. All right. Hey, well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the 23rd hour, I guess the 22nd, going into the 23rd hour of WordSesh 3. Welcome, folks, to the WordPress News Roundtable, and we've even got an elf hat rolling here, so this is a little scary. We've got some pretty awesome folks here, from WP Tavern to Torque to the best podcast in the world around WordPress, Dradcast, as well as gentlemen you may know from Post Status. Guys, I'd like to go around. If you can introduce yourself, kind of talk a little bit about your news and media background and what you're doing in the WordPress space specifically today, and then we'll get into a good line of questioning and banter and maybe some discussion with the audience.
Do it. I'll kick it off. I'm Brad Williams. I'm the good-looking host on the Dradcast. It's a weekly WordPress podcast. We've been going about 2 years strong now. Prior to that, I've been podcasting for a while. I've been on WordPress Weekly since the start, off and on, mostly off, but on a few times. We did WP Late Night for a year or so, and I started and ran the SitePoint podcast for about 3 years. So, been podcasting for a number of years now and really enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Chandler. I do WordPress Weekly every Friday. I've been doing podcasting for several years now. I also do contributing writer to WordPress Tavern, one of the largest sites devoted to WordPress, its ecosystem. And I don't have any media, any background at all. I just started up a blog one day, started writing about stuff I was interested in, and it sort of matured into this thing called WP Tavern, where I ended up gaining quite a substantial audience. So kind of interesting how I have no background in this whatsoever, yet now I'm operating one of the largest sites devoted to WordPress about news. So kind of crazy.
Awesome.
Hey, my name's Doc. I'm helping out with Marie at Torque magazine. Torque is WordPress news, but mostly like reviews and walkthroughs. My personal background is I've had a WordPress site of my own for 10 years. I've blogged for Laughing Squid and contributed to Boing Boing and a few other kind of big blogs and weekly newspapers is kind of my older history before that. So I'm new to the specific space of WordPress news, but I've been doing news and WordPress for quite some time.
My name is Brian Krogsgard. I'm the editor and dictator of Post Status, a WordPress blog for industry professionals. Today is my first day doing that as a part of my actual business. Plan for that to be my primary product in my new life, and I'm disappointed in the members of the Dradcast for making me drink alone tonight.
Hey, if this is your first day at Post Status, then shouldn't you be working?
I know.
What is this?
Drinking on the job already, I see. Jeez, that took quite a while. Man, and dictator, you damn commie. But congratulations nonetheless. Guys, a bunch of cool questions, and then again, I want to flag some discussion points from the crowd as we go. But I think we need to step into the discussion around WordPress and news specifically, right? It's a very small, very niche audience when it comes to the sub-community or the small community of business and enthusiasts, evangelists, if you will, in the scope of the broader kind of user base that we have. How has that been a challenge in building consistent maybe content or relevant content to engage that audience, being it's such a close niched community? And feel free any of you to jump in there on that discussion point to kick off.
And being the fact I'm not a content writer per se, I have a blog, but I don't really blog very well or consistently. So the way I do content is I talk, right, on the podcast, which is fun. So I think the WordPress community is really weird because, like you said, Dre, it's a small community. However, it's a huge user base. I mean, there's tens of millions of sites running WordPress more and more every day, which means the audience is there. So when we say it's a small community, that's certainly true. But some of the things we're talking about, they span outside the community topics. You know what I mean? So we're discussing things like the latest version of WordPress that just came out, and there's 70 million sites that are going to hopefully update to that version of WordPress. So I think that is actually one of the challenges, is getting some of the content that we're producing out, try to get it out beyond just that small community to the masses, because it would be helpful to them.
I think I've spoken to Brian Krogsgard about this before, and he sort of brought up the same point where, if I look at WP Tavern, it's pretty popular. It has quite a number of page views and visitors, but if you look at the grand scheme of things, I mean, WordPress is running over 20% of the web, huge user base, millions of websites, yet it seems like the Tavern, because we're specific on just WordPress stuff, that it's very narrow. There's a very limited audience that we're getting to, and I mean, if the issue is trying to expand outside of that WordPress community, the WordPress bubble that supposedly sites like WP Tavern is in, how do you do that? How do you branch off into some of these other verticals, other than writing about them?
Well, I think there's a separate challenge there. The currently engaged audience may not be as big as those who should be engaged. The community of web professionals that use WordPress in their business but don't really, talk about it or keep up necessarily with the day-to-day of WordPress is much larger than those that are using it as their business, but they're not really paying, but they are paying attention to the day-to-day. And I think if we, as writers with our own publications and podcasts, we're targeting people inherently. WP Tavern and Torque are both approaching a really wide audience, where Dradcast and myself are probably targeting a much more narrow audience. So it's all about how we define who we're going after, and that shapes the content that we're creating for them.
As far as content for Torque goes, we've been pretty lucky. We've been doing about 9 pieces a week, and they're a mix of reviews and interviews and all sorts of stuff. I guess the trick that we sort of struggle with is figuring out if we're an advanced blog or like an introductory blog, because certainly I'd say half our articles are like how to install a plugin or something, like just kind of a very specific walkthrough that someone might just be searching for, and they'd find us. So we are kind of struggling with that idea of like, how do we just be one thing? But in terms of having enough content, there's no shortage of it. There's always, between the third-party releases and the really cool people we get to talk to and the tutorials, there's always something. We don't struggle for lack of pieces. It's just maybe just trying to find that specific thing.
And I think maybe expanding your audience, even within that niche, I think you spoke to that pretty well, Brian. It makes sense. But in the context of Torque, for example, you have some really maybe technical stuff, and then a different audience there that you're trying to target. Do you sometimes feel or see that you're maybe alienating one over the other because of the way that you're configured there? Does it make sense to segment that out in a way that you can push to both of those audiences, but keep them maybe separate? Does that something like that make sense to do?
Yeah, I don't know that we're alienating anyone. I do feel that we are having a hard time for people to understand maybe what we are. But in terms of like, no one seems to complain when we do something too advanced or something too basic. It's more of like when we go to a WordCamp, people struggle just kind of identifying like what it is we do, and I guess that's something we're looking to try to figure out as well. I think one step for that is to try to step a little bit out of like the news. We're not going to try to break news. I mean, with occasional pieces, but for the most part, I think we're going to be very, very good at doing, details on certain things, but not news, not like things that just happen. But beyond that, trying to identify ourselves, I think we are going to try to go more for the advanced user. But it's hard, because sometimes those tutorials really do help. They help people, and they send new traffic to our site. Whether or not they'll come back again is, if they're a beginner, they might not.
Come on, those tutorials, man, that's long-tail traffic right there. That's delicious. That is just good.
This is, I think, a challenge with just WordPress in general, right? This is the same thing that WordCamp see and Meetup see is how do you satisfy everybody that's interested in WordPress? through the topics that you're talking about, right? It's a big challenge because it has such a wide spectrum of users, you know, from, like you said, from the beginner users to people that don't really care about the software, to the writers, you know, the bloggers, that they just want a good platform, something that's easy to use, all the way up to the devs and designers and sysadmins. And I mean, so there's so many different areas that you could, any one of us could touch on or talk about to try to cover everything that could fit inside the WordPress bubble. It's a huge amount of work.
A couple things that y'all are talking about. One, take the instance you gave, Doc, of how to install a plugin, where this is super generic, you know, concept that gets searched for a ton. Dre, you mentioned long tail traffic, but at the same time, like, maybe those are just creating vanity metrics if you're really going after the core of the WordPress audience.
Sure.
I know personally, I just kind of got over the fact that I'm not going to get 100,000 visitors a day, but I can get 5,000 or 10,000 visitors that are like the people that really care about the platform. So for me, that was about defining who my audience is in a tagline, and I've made that for myself to be a website for WordPress professionals. I don't need to describe to those people how to install a plugin, but I might want to describe to them how to price a WordPress website.
So maybe it's not expanding your audience altogether, but expanding into the right audience that makes more sense.
Right.
And at least as far as Torque is concerned, Doc, how many writers do you have on Torque? And is it the same a lot, or is it different people, different folks, and different contributions?
We have 6 writers that are pretty consistent. Josh being one of our heaviest, and Marie writing quite a bit too for like our interviews. And then past that, we get some people who maybe contribute once a month or once every other month. But in terms of the main, we have 6 main authors who are really kind of carving out their own niches on our site. Like, they kind of own certain articles and territories.
Because the one thing I always thought about with the Tavern, I started the Tavern, and it was just me. The Tavern was Jeff Chandler. Post status is Brian. Not anymore. Brian Krogsgard is post status, and now I have Sarah Gooding has joined the Audrey team, and she's a awesome contributing writer for the Tavern. So she's got her beat, I've got my beat. Doc, have you struggled with sort of creating this unified voice for Torque Mag, sort of giving it some sort of identity, or how have you worked with the branding of Torque Mag in terms of what you guys do?
I'm actually surprised at how consistent our writers seem to be. And Marie does most of the editing, but even before her final polish on things, we seem to have pretty consistent voices there. But like I was saying, like, next year we are trying to figure out a little bit more specifically what our voice is going to be. I think our voice is very passive, like very tutorial and straightforward, and not very opinionated. And we may keep it that way next year, like very unopinionated, or we may try to kind of be someone who like tries to I don't know, not stir up controversy, but have like strong points of view whenever we recommend something, rather than sort of like, you could do this or you could do that. So that's the sort of thing that we're working on now.
I just want to point out that we're 14 minutes into this before Jeffro started taking over the interview portion.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, look, if you want to go ahead and moderate from here on out, Jeff, I'm going to grab it. Good.
I knew it would happen. I just didn't think it'd be that quick.
I am really thirsty.
Wow, you had money on this? Did you win money?
I lost, but it's cool.
We bet candy canes.
Let's push on from that, because I think the audience discussion is good, but we've seen historically with WordPress-specific news sites and news entities and so on, whether it's blogs or article sites or podcasts, that we've had challenges sustaining those news sources for various reasons. We've seen a kind of movement over the last couple of years of some being acquired and restarted, or taking some type of corporate backing or sponsorship. What's it take to build a successful source, maybe with corporate backing and without? I mean, is there a place where we kind of want this to go? Is there a place that naturally this is building into? Because I've seen the biggest successes out of these news sites when they've gotten some of that backing. What's the model for success here? Colgate.
Come on, Brian. Let us know. This
Has
is
anyone
right up
figured
your
it out
alley.
yet? I think that's the biggest thing. Like I don't think anyone's quite nailed it. I mean, I think some sites have gotten close. WP Candy comes to mind. But I mean, I don't know. Tavern, post status. What do you guys think?
Well, for the tavern, I went through a period there. I was doing it on my own. I was trying to turn it into my full-time gig. So I had banner advertising, affiliate advertising. I started creating advertising on the podcast. Unfortunately for myself, and it's a problem that many other people have, is I severely undervalued myself. So I was practically giving away stuff for free, when it comes to advertising, and I had no idea what I was doing. I don't know. I tried for a long time to make it work, but it just didn't work out, pun intended. But so I eventually had to put the site up for sale because it just wasn't working. So I'm probably the worst guy to ask about what it takes to succeed, because I didn't succeed. I ended up having to sell out.
I think Jeff was a little ahead of his time, or a little ahead of the time, to where it became something that could be done. At the time, it was like, ask me, hey, I'll give you $100, but maybe 5 people would do that, like with the VIP program that he put in place at one point. And even affiliate programs weren't that broad. There are a lot of sites that are not necessarily WordPress news sites, but they're making a lot of money with affiliate programs. And by a lot, I might say enough to sustain one medium-sized salary. People are making maybe $3,000 to $7,000 a month in affiliate revenue, or more in some instances. I'm sure WP Beginner makes a fortune. But as far as pure news sites, personally, I risked my job and put it all on the line with the bet that I can make it work. I don't think the data set of failed news sites is exactly big enough to say that it's not possible. In my opinion, the way to make it possible is to offer something that gives people a solid value, being the content and the insight that you can provide that other people aren't providing. And in my case, I'm asking them to sustain me via memberships, both corporate and personal. And I think that it's going to happen. I'm pretty confident from a corporate standpoint. Most of the corporations, or most of the companies in the WordPress world that I've approached, have said they want to be on board without asking the price. The big curveball is, will 50 individuals or freelancers join at the personal level, or will 250, or will 1,000? And that's going to make all the difference in the world. My goal for the first 6 months to a year is 250. I hope that's the low end of the goal, but I don't know. If 250 people join, then I will happily give them the same value that I would give 1,000.
I'm going to support you, big guy. That's for damn sure.
Well, I appreciate it. But I do think it can work.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it could work too. I mean, it's like you said. It's rather than going the approach of, hey, here's some ads you can buy. You basically, you had a great post that you put out there, Brian, that I really like, and I respect the way you did it, where you kind of said, look, I don't know the best way to do this, so I'm just going to throw out a bunch of ideas and get your feedback, to your readers, to your community. I thought that was a really, it's a ballsy approach to doing, but I thought it was really, really clever, and really showed that you care as much about the value you're providing as you do with those, your readers and what they can expect. I think that's a really cool approach. Get your readers, get your community to help support your site, not necessarily just through advertising. And I think they will. I mean, this community has shown time and time again that it's a very close-knit community. We help each other out. There's a lot of really cool stuff we've seen around Kickstarters and social funding type things for various people. Of just a bunch, just a way for us to say thanks, and even if we're only donating $1 or $5, that adds up when there's a few hundred people doing it, So I'm excited to see where you're at in 6 months. I think you're right. I think you're on the low end there of your estimate, and I know I'll support you as well.
Yeah, and the hard part about that is, it's hard for me to consider it in terms of charity. So in the way that I'm approaching it is I have to offer value. And the way that I do that is people that join as a member are going to get actual content, resources, and access that people that don't join won't. And in a way that hurts, the openness concept that we'd love to think about. But it's just part of it. The people that support you are the people that get the goods. It's just like buying a plugin or a theme. You get support for that plugin or a theme. It's the same concept, but this is for insight and a community around WordPress content.
So that's one model, and I think go ahead.
I was just going to say I think that with any small community, the most interesting stuff oftentimes comes from the individuals who are just really passionate. They don't really have anything at stake, and they speak with like such. It's just so fun to watch, and it's so much more interesting sometimes. And what happens is that's hard to scale. You couldn't hire a staff necessarily. It's hard to do full time. So it's mostly driven out of passion for however long you can sustain it, 6 months or a year. But what's really awesome now is the idea of like crowdfunding, and especially with open source communities, more so than some of the other blogging communities or game development. The Patreon model or Kickstarter model, I think, it's going to be really exciting to see in the WordPress community how it affects, starting with like JJJs or maybe some before that, but that was kind of a big one. And seeing bloggers using it, seeing developers using it, it's going to be a really exciting year for crowdfunding and journalism for WordPress.
And I think you hit it on the head because of the open source nature. We'd like to see people be successful. We want to see our community grow, and if we're promoting those awesome positive things for folks in our community, those successes I think translate to what we're doing and where we want to go as well. So I see a lot of that coming as well. I think that we established that you've got one model going on there, Brian, and I wish you many successes. We're supporting that 100%. But we have seen kind of corporate backing. We've seen organizations come in and take over news sources. We've seen them, take a majority stake in them. How does that affect everything that's happening there from that news source? What does the perception look like when these news sources are ran, owned, even heavily sponsored by companies or organizations that are part of the competitive space?
It's hard to for Torque, which is owned by WP or funded by WP Engine and WP Engine Labs. Sure. It's hard to control the perception no matter what you do. For anybody, there's always going to be perception. But I can tell you from the inside, the biggest thing that I think it results in, which is comedic, is that we hardly ever cover WP Engine stuff. Internally, we hear about stuff and we're scared to talk about it, I think, because of that fear of perception. But even so, people still have perceptions about it, and there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the one of the founders of WordPress actually owns WP Tavern. I mean, there's no conflict of interest there, is there? But so I mean that's I knew that was going to be a big deal for folks when they found out that he had purchased WP Tavern, and there's actually a few people out there that said, "Oh, look, now he's controlling the media." But he's been very hands-off, and I think you can tell based on the content that's been published on the Tavern that we are critical when we feel that criticism needs to be addressed. We've written about Jetpack, we've written about companies, we've written about Matt Mulloway. I mean, nothing's really changed if you really analyze the types of content that we put out there. But I know that perception is there. It will always be there no matter what we do. And as long as I'm just going to let the content speak for our editorial policies and what we're doing. And as long as we toe that line, we'll be okay.
Okay, so let me take this a different direction with a question that came in from the actual WordSesh site, which I find interesting because I think that validation is a key factor that I take into business. So when I'm releasing a product or new service and such, other people start to do kind of similar things, and that validates the space and such. We have various sites and various vehicles for news in the WordPress space, but why do we need more than one source? Why do we need multiple sources in such a small space? Brian, if you can kind of speak to that, and then whoever wants to interject from there, that'd be awesome.
I think different people give different insight. I think it's pretty much as simple as that. When you look at the people that have pretty large voices in the WordPress ecosystem, they come from different backgrounds, and therefore they offer different content. I think Jeffro offers a user perspective that few do, and similarly, I think you and Brad offer a business owner's perspective. I think Chris Lima offers a more of a coaching and startup person's perspective, and I think those things are important.
I think from on the business side of things, as a business owner, I really love the fact there's multiple sites out there writing about what's going on in the community. Because I'm watching all that stuff. I watch it not just for obviously doing the Dradcast, but also as the owner, co-owner of Web Dev Studios. I need to see what's out there. I need to see what the competition is doing. I need to see what the new technologies are. I need to keep tabs on the news in our industry and in our community, and that's really important. And helping our company grow, I think, is keeping that out. And it's also very important to us if we have a big announcement or a big product release or whatever. We've seen some very big impact by getting some write-ups on things like the Tavern or Torque or Post Status, and getting more eyeballs on what we just launched than we would have just through our blog and through our social media. So from both standpoints on the business side, I mean, I think it's very important that there's multiple publications. The more, the better.
That said, I think there are some conversations that we may be missing. I don't think every release of Jetpack is necessarily newsworthy, or some other plugin. But I think one of the things we may be missing, and there's a lot of room that we can grow, would be how are different people using WordPress? I mean, with 70 million sites, there are stories out there of people becoming millionaires using WordPress, or bootstrapping their company with WordPress as a core tool, or all sorts of things that are really difficult to find out with doing some serious digging. And I think there's a lot of different avenues that we can take to discover these stories that would be really interesting that aren't necessarily just another theme or another plugin update or something like that. I think we can diversify what we're looking toward, what we're looking at.
You bring up a good point, and I think that the best, I wonder why a lot more, I mean, there's so many WordPress development agencies, and for whatever reason, either they're busy or what, but I don't see a lot of them publishing case studies on the work they've done for a specific website and what the end result is, saying, hey, we've made all these changes, and look, this is this person, this is their website, this is what they sell, we did all these changes, and now they're raking in the dough. I like to see more WordPress agencies develop and write these case studies to not only show off the work they're doing, but also their clients. Of course, your clients would have to be okay with that.
I'd like to see my company do more case studies, and I think it does go back to, like you said, Jeff, it's a timing thing, and it's obviously if you're going to do a case study, there's a lot of work involved with that to do it right. I absolutely agree, and I think I would imagine most companies out there have the same situation where you're so busy with the work and the projects that you're doing that it's always hard to circle back and spend the time on things like that. But I think it's really important. We actually started Web Dev Studios. We started a initiative a few months back where we got our team involved in writing articles on our blog. Sharing knowledge, sharing things they're learning, new technologies, whatever it is. So we pumped out probably 20 or 30 really, really great posts, I think, and the team's loving it. So it's our team members writing them and kind of sharing their knowledge of what they're learning and code snippets and what they're building through that way, which is a much easier to donate or dedicate someone for a couple hours to write a blog post versus spending 20 or 30 hours on a case study. So that's one way, like at Web Dev, that we're kind of releasing some content that I think is pretty interesting.
Drew James made a good point that sometimes people don't do case studies because because of the clients and the situation, that information can't be shared.
Sure.
I think the other reason is sometimes people in consultancies are busy, and it's hard to put the new stuff up, and especially to do it with any form of thoroughness, unless you have a pretty solid idea of what kind of value that's going to deliver. And if you're just getting overrun with leads anyway, and you're growing basically as fast as you can, then maybe you just won't have all that much reason to put those case studies up, which is too bad because I'd love to see them.
Well, and back to kind of the sites that and the different news sources that we see in the WordPress space today. Value is certainly important, but we want to see very objective, and I think objective content. We want things that stick to the facts. And oftentimes, I mean, we really do entrench ourselves because of the passion that we have around maybe WordPress and writing about it and such. We definitely attach personal bias to some of the content that we're creating. Let's talk about opinion within news content and versus reporting just like the real news. What journalistic standards should we be holding ourselves to as we're maturing kind of this news space around WordPress? Is there a standard there that we should be working towards?
Well, Doc has multiple authors for Torque Mag. I think this is up his alley.
Yeah, I mean, for us, like I was saying, a lot of our authors tend to specialize in mostly like not reviews as much, but tutorials. Sometimes we do get people who write in asking to write maybe a case study, like you guys were talking about, who ultimately are interested in doing it for kind of self-promotional things, and that's one of the ones that we just try to make sure that, I mean, we understand that they're experts in a security plugin, and they want to mention that security plugin, but they're also speaking with such authority and such passion about what they're doing that it's something we want to have them do. We just make sure that we try to prevent them from being too heavily commercial. But for the most of our rest of our content, I don't think we've quite gotten to the point where we've figured out, like, our news coverage is so straightforward for the most part. I mean, I feel like it is. It's not something we've tried to figure out exactly what our standards are. It's more like when people are submitting to us, we're just trying to make sure they're not promoting themselves too heavy.
I think journalism's changing in general, not just in our space of how we cover news versus opinion. I think those lines are blending more and more across a lot of publications. Mm-hmm. I know in my case, I'm going to tell the truth to the best of my ability in every post I write, and I'm absolutely going to be opinionated in every single post that I write. And if I think somebody needs calling out, or if I think they're doing it wrong, then I'm going to say that. If I don't, then I won't, or I'll call out somebody doing something well. I'm going to have that blend, and if somebody wants to say that's bad journalism, then they can. If they want to say it is perfect.
I've never pegged you as the opinionated type, Brian.
Really?
Well, you know, so that begs the question. So how does that get when you, or what's that scenario look like when it's revolving around relationships or organizations that you have some affiliation with, and they're wanting you to report on something? How do you manage those relationships? How does that come to play in terms of what you're going to really output on your site?
Yeah, it definitely
your podcast, for that matter.
Definitely comes up a lot, or at least periodically. I can remember a couple scenarios. I'll use one example because it's something that came and it happened, was when WooThemes had a hack on their website. I was having conversations with the founders of WooThemes, who I consider friends. I went to Cape Town to their WordCamp, and they hosted me. And they had something bad happen, and they hadn't reported it yet because they were trying to figure out all the details. I ended up reporting on that, but I was also communicating with them, letting them know what I was going to do, and generally both trying to report the news as best as I could, trying to say where I think things might have gone wrong, where they shouldn't have gone wrong, and they held some responsibility there. But at the same time, trying to treat them like human beings and give them the respect that they deserved. And at the end of that, there were some tense moments around that, because this is their livelihood at stake, and I'm talking about it and writing about it. But I think it was handled well, and we all got through it. I think it's a matter of just trying to treat others as you'd hope to be treated in the same situation.
Yeah, this is something I've struggled with. I've been writing about WordPress for 7 years or more now, and over that period of time, I speak to many different companies, individuals. I know them. Sometimes I know them on a personal level, and one of the things I've been struggling with is trying to maintain distance from those individuals and companies to the point where I'm not writing things, or to the point where it's not manipulating what I say on the website. And I believe you could be too close to the story or too close to the people you're writing about, and it really could have an impact on you. But I'm slowly but surely trying to put myself in a position. I'm trying to space myself between individuals and companies, so that as long as I can maintain that space, I'll be okay.
It's hard, though, because sometimes getting close to someone is the way you get the story.
Exactly.
So I'm more of the opinion of I'm willing to be someone's friend, and they also know that when the story comes up that I'm going to cover on them, I'm going to cover it, whether it's good news or bad news. If it's newsworthy, I'm going to cover it.
That's why Brian's always buying beers.
I know. He's like, here, get him drunk. This will work great.
Beer is the secret ingredient to a scoop.
Now, Brian or Doc, have you come across a situation yet where you've established these relationships, you've written a post, you've come off negative because maybe that's how you see things, and that's it. The bridge has been burned, or have you been able to maintain your relationship with that company afterwards?
Listen, before we even go there, Jeff, as long as we're not acting like Eeyore, we're probably all right. But now that I've thrown that out there, sorry.
I haven't had a situation where someone
we've had
disowned me.
some.
Sorry about that, Doc. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say we've had some posts that were interpreted negatively, and that was a total surprise to us. People felt slighted, community, and it's easy to step.
And he's gone. Yeah, that's what he gets.
We lost Doc.
Hey, I feel slighted, so I just knocked him out of the channel. I mean, I was done. No. I hope he makes it back. It looks like we lost him. You were going to say something, Brian, there about that whole scenario.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I've never had someone disown me because I wrote something about them. I think it's hard to, get disowned or just really be written off by somebody if you do everything you can to treat them with respect. I have had a situation or two where someone wasn't treating me with respect, so instead of engaging, I just decided I wasn't going to write about them, talk about them, or talk to them. So I, just ignore them and they go away.
Yeah, it's like my wife does that to me. It's great. Doc, what were you saying there, big guy? Can you follow up on what you were chatting about there?
Yeah, I was just saying that there's a lot of people and it seems like a small community, and we've pissed off people, and it was a surprise to us. We didn't even think it was a slight, and then a week later everything was totally fine. So it seems to be sometimes tempers rise in small communities, but nothing lasts. It seems like everyone's cool. They're all nice people. But yeah, we've had some people, and it was a total surprise to us that they felt slighted by something we wrote that didn't even strike us as negative at the time.
Yeah, it's a fine line. I think that if you're upfront and honest and you have an open relationship, I don't know if it's a bad thing covering bad or good. I think as friends of those folks that are maybe writing these pieces, we need to be respectful of them and making sure that we understand that they need to objectively cover the topic if it is something of importance. Now, talking about topics and things that we should be covering, are there areas in the WordPress community that as folks that are talking publicly about WordPress topics that we're missing? Is there something that we could be doing better? Are there areas that we should be focusing on that will help people understand about WordPress or growing WordPress? Where can we go from here? Ooh, yes. Man, I'm stumping all day.
We're definitely missing things I think that we can be covering. I think process stories are really important. Sometimes we don't talk about how the sausage is made well enough, I don't think. Whether that's how a website's made, how a conference is run, like the really nitty-gritty bits, how people are using WordPress day to day, how businesses are using WordPress to make money. I think we also stay away from money too much. One of my goals, now that I'm going to have a little more time to write, is to really try to get people to open up more about the money side of their business, whether that's a site owner using WordPress to make money, like seeing changes on their website to assign value to web development work, or questioning whether all web development work has value. I think there's a lot of interesting conversations that we can have that one person being a little bit vulnerable can help a much broader community really learn and be better at what they're doing.
Couldn't agree more. Geez, anybody else have a take on that?
No, I mean, if you look at what we cover, I've been wanting to kind of branch out, and I think Brian's right on the money here. It would be great to see more of the process versus just strictly news items or a product or a review. But how was that product made? What were the decisions made? How did you come up with the price? It'd be nice to see more information, in that realm, and something we're going to try and work towards more in 2015 on the Tavern.
I think there's nothing more interesting than a good post-mortem write-up from anybody. This is what we did. This is the mistakes we made, and here's how you can learn. No matter what field it is, I think it's interesting to other people when you're talking about business and decisions. I'd love to see more of that too. And I think something else we'd like to see more of in Torque is like personal stories of like sites that we like and how people are using things very interestingly. For WordPress, there's lots of artists, there's lots of businesses. How can we focus on what they're doing and make it interesting to our advanced readers, something they can apply to their own sites?
I can dig it. I'm going to take this on a kind of a different ride, certainly. This week there was an influence list posted on Torque magazine online, and it got mixed reviews. It was all over the place in terms of kind of the reaction that we saw.
I loved it.
Right? Me included. I think it was awesome. In fact, a really cool list. Maybe it wasn't taken for what it was worth. I think it was really cool and nice to see that list put together. I don't know that I personally agree with having influence lists online because I think that, talking about that word earlier, alienating, it kind of maybe causes some friction in some instances, and I think we saw that. Quick take from each one of you: do or don't? Should we be running with influence lists or not?
Well, I know which list you're referring to, and I was on it, and Matt Muller was not, and I'll just mic drop.
You're obviously more important than that.
Well, of course. I mean, you run the tavern, baby.
I mean, my take on it,
Man.
I think those lists are cool. I mean, I find it odd that this is the list that everyone decided to like say they didn't like, because I've been seeing those lists since I got started with WordPress, and now this is the year that people don't like those lists apparently. So I think those lists are cool. I like the ones that are a little more focused, that say maybe here's the top, that maybe the most interesting most 10 developers or something that are doing really cool plugins at the moment, or the most interesting theme designers of the moment. Having 100 people on a list is just a big list, right? That's pretty big. But I think overall they're pretty fun. You can find some people to follow, especially if you don't know who all's out there, or you're just getting into the space, and you're getting interested and excited about WordPress, and it's a great way to just find some people on Twitter and start getting into the convo.
In moderation, I think lists like this are awesome. I would hate to see it once a week on different things, but like once a year, once a month, or whatever, they're great. And it was really awesome hearing from people say, like, I'm just new to this space, and this is like an instant starter. That was the most positive thing that we got out of it.
I don't think this list was any worse or better than most of the other lists about people to follow or whatever in WordPress. They have been around for a long time. This one just got brought to the forefront because a lead developer of WordPress brought it there. My problem with stuff like this is I think there's a lot of important people to WordPress, and I just think of the scenario of, and I wrote about this in my WordPress Army blog post, what if you were working on a WordPress feature for like 4 months, and you were pivotal to that feature, and it shipped, and you were proud, and then someone puts this like 100 people who do stuff in WordPress, and they're awesome, and you're not on that list, and you just devoted thousands of hours of your time to it. Like, being sensitive to that, I just don't like lists of people. I do think that it's good to responsibly, highlight excellence in some way, but I think it requires more than just a simple list of like, these people are great, go follow them.
So first piece that kind of struck me funny is one, I wasn't included, but that's fine. Although I don't like the description they gave Brad, which is he is also a host on podcast Dragcast, which I'm part of that. Jeez.
I'm obviously the other more important host. I mean,
I was going to write a news story that says Brad and Dre get a divorce based on that list and use that as my evidence.
It'll never happen. Now, the other one that caught my attention was Mark Jakewith is a passionate web developer and WordPress lover.
That was my favorite one.
That was it. I was like, cold game. Mark, you don't mean anything to this damn community. Now, I'm a fan of it. I think this was a really cool list, and I found some people on here that I wasn't following and that are doing really cool stuff. So I'm not worried about it. It's good times. Guys, you have any other questions you'd like to cover, areas and topics that you'd like to discuss? Jeez.
I mentioned this before we were chatting, but I'd love to hear where you guys want to see your conversations happening, where you see them happening. When you write something, do people write on Twitter or Facebook? Where do you like to be to see that?
So let me throw this one out there because I'm not a big I like content, and I think there's various types of content. My content is like Brad. I like to speak. I never shut the hell up. I'm very opinionated, and I've got a lot to discuss. So it's going to be in some type of audio format. Where that lands, I mean, certainly on the site, syndicated on Torque, which I'm not afraid to say. But Twitter, I love the dialogue that kind of stems from those discussions into the social space, like Facebook and Twitter. I think that's a neat place to interact. But having it on a WordPress site somewhere is obviously where I want it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want it to be in the comments. I want it to be where the source of the content is. I want it to be on that page, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or whatever it is. But in my experience, what I've seen is that discussions, you might see an article that has 3 comments, but then on Twitter there's 50 people participating in the conversation.
It's going nuts.
And that conversation ends up disappearing. There's no way to properly archive it. It's hard to navigate. And I would like to see more of the conversation come back, to the comment forum. But as we've seen, several different websites out there are just turning comments off in favor of letting the conversation happen everywhere else but their site.
I like that a lot of conversations start on Twitter. I think blog posts help people form arguments better. Comments are a great place to churn that over, and then I think in person at WordCamps or something like that is a great place to hug it out when it's all over. Nothing makes up for the event itself.
Oh man, good times. Well, geez, I'd like to. I think we're just about out of time. I don't see any more questions here in the chat room that we need to cover. I think we nailed all the big ones. Unless you guys have anything else.
I have one question for Brian.
Fire away.
And that is, if I saw a post in here by Justin Fairman or something, and he says something to the point that people will subscribe to people and not news sites, and that's why they're going to probably subscribe to you, Brian. And if you take a look at your post and all the comments, all of the support you've garnered, where people have said that you're the reason why they've gained their dream project, or you've motivated them to be a better person in the WordPress community. How does that make you feel?
I think it feels great, but I don't think I'm that unique in the sense of people that are influencing others. Mine may be a little bit more of a one-to-many relationship because I'm loud and blog about stuff. But a lot of people are, one-to-one, like mentoring each other, partnering together, all sorts of stuff. So, I mean, I feel privileged to be in the situation that I'm in, but I think there's a lot of people doing pretty awesome stuff in our community, and I think the WordPress community is pretty special in that sense of how close it is and how much people are kind of sharing what they're learning and doing partnerships and all sorts of cool stuff, and the sense of competition is so much lower than you see in other industries.
And guys, it's been a damn great time chatting with you, Brian. I wish you a million successes. 100% support, big guy. I hope you're excited about it, and I guarantee you're going to learn a lot along the way. And I hope you dialogue that with the rest of us. In closing, I do want to do a little selfless plug here. webdevstudios.com/blog, and the reason for that, one, it's a great blog to go check out. We're putting out a lot of good content, but on there specifically, we have done a holiday charity competition, and there's a lot of people in need this year-round, but this time of year, it's always great to help out folks that need a little bit of help. So if you can, be as kind of go over to webdevstudios.com/blog, find the holiday charity competition blog post, and go donate to one of the causes that we have there. It'll mean the world to a lot of people, and hey, I bet you'll feel good about it. Guys, Brian, Doc, Jeff, Brad, you guys are awesome. I hope to continue working with you guys. Keep on kicking ass, and thanks for joining us on WordSesh. This is the News Roundtable, baby. We out. Boom.
Deuces.